So, what if the very thing that made you feel different was actually your superpower? Today, we are talking with Rachel Radway, who is rewriting the script on what it means to embrace being wired differently. And this is our member spotlight, and I am super excited to have Rachel join us. So, Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for having me. I am very happy to be talking with you this afternoon.
Me too. I'm excited because you've got some awesome things going on in your world, and I can't wait to share them with our community and hopefully open up some collaborative opportunities for you and for them. So that's what this member spotlight is all about. It's to highlight somebody in our amazing community and then create an opportunity for collaboration. So as we go into that conversation, first, I would love to hear what is your mission or what is your calling?
So I love that question. It's funny because it's changed a little bit. Up until a couple of years ago, I would have said it's to help facilitate communication between people, between organizations, whatever that means. I was actually told by a couple of people who see things that I don't see that communication was my mission. In the last 2 years, I have refined it a little bit, and I work to empower people who are wired a little differently to really create the conditions that they need to thrive. So it's kind of a two-part mission because one part of it is working directly with my clients, and another part is helping organizations create more psychologically safe and more inclusive workspaces.
Mm.
So inclusion and helping everyone thrive is really the ultimate goal, and there are just kind of two angles to get there, or maybe
Yeah.
more than two angles.
Is it okay if I asked what contributed to the shift or the pivot or the refinement of what your mission is?
I don't, it's funny because the communication is still very much there, and it's very much foundational to all of the work that I do.
Mhm.
Um, when I started coaching, I knew that I wanted to work with women leaders. And what I learned as things progressed was that all of the people who were drawn to me were wired a little differently. And we can talk about that phrase too, because I use it intentionally.
Mhm.
Um, I've done quite a lot of reading and research and interviews since then. And we'll be talking a little bit about the book that I've been working on and writing, which is one of the reasons that I've been doing all of the interviews. And realize that this is, first of all, it's so common. Um, for really smart, really talented, really competent, capable, high achieving people. And I work with women, but it's gender agnostic, the traits. It's just that I happen to work with women. That these people who are brilliant and talented and competent and high achievers, so many of them feel a little differently and think a little differently from the people around them. And that is often, I know, this group is for entrepreneurs. That is often a driver for people to start their own business, whether or
Mm.
not you've been in a more conventional space. There are a lot of people who become entrepreneurs after they've come out of corporate because they realize they're not wired the same way that a lot of the people they were working with are. And I have learned a huge amount about myself in that period of time as well. I was diagnosed with ADHD early last year.
Mm.
And I have also learned that I have a number of autistic traits. And I'm still making sense of a lot of that. There are, we can dig more into it. But there's a huge amount of overlap in the world that I work with in the area of neurodiversity and just being wired differently. And there are so many strengths and gifts that come with the way that we're wired that I really want to. I'm going to step back for a second. I know that that was a really long answer. I do want to say I spent almost 30 years in the corporate world before I became a coach and before I got my training and my certification. And what I have realized in the past couple of years is most of the time that I spent in that world, I was masking. I was not necessarily conscious of it. In fact, most of the time I wasn't, but I was never really free or safe, never felt free or safe to be fully who I am, to be my authentic self. So that has been uh, the real answer to the question that you asked me
Mhm.
minutes ago.
No, that's all good. That's all good. I love when people kind of go sideways and come back. There's just such a beauty in giving people the floor to just navigate whatever comes out and pours out of their soul, their heart, their mind, I just feel genuinely that whatever comes through is guided. Whatever comes through, it's like somebody needed to hear that, even if you felt like you didn't quite answer the question directly and you took a sideways route to get there. Somebody needed to hear it. So thank you.
Well,
Um, so do tell us a little bit about who your right fit client is and who the people are that you work with and what makes them unique and special.
absolutely. So I typically work with women leaders, and my definition of leadership is very broad. It doesn't mean that you have a specific kind of title. I do work with women both in the corporate world and entrepreneurs and small business owners and founders. Um, Leaders to me, it can be leading in your professional life. It can also be leading in your community or in your family. But to me, leaders have a vision and they're carrying it out. And there are people who believe in you and follow you in some way. And the women I work with tend to be um, they tend to have some experience, between 15 and 20 years, a lot of them in the work world. They also um, tend to be super smart and the high achievers that I was describing earlier. So they are driven, they are talented, they're often creative. Um, and I work with these women in two different ways. I do one-on-one leadership and executive coaching, and I also run a mastermind, as you do, um, specifically for these women. And it's called the Grit Collaborative. And GRIT is an acronym for Grace, Resilience, Intuition, and Trust, which are cornerstones of the program. What I find is we tend to, we want to make things black and white, good or bad, we want to see the binary in things, and the traits that we have really aren't binary. They aren't inherently good or bad or innately good or bad, but there are two sides to every coin, right? There's
Mhm.
always a balance. And we as humans have a negativity bias for the most part in our brains, and we tend to
Mhm.
focus on the negative things.
Mhm.
So part of my work is helping people recognize the strengths. You okay? The good and the bad. It's always an adventure. You okay?
Went
Okay.
down the
Uh,
wrong tube.
Got it.
Carry on.
I will carry on. Um, so one of the things that I focus on is helping these women, many of whom have gotten messages for many, many years, often from childhood, that they were weird or crazy or broken in some way or just wrong or different in a way that needed to be fixed. I want them to see their superpowers. And it's interesting. There's some people that have a really strong reaction to the word superpower. And I've had this conversation many times in the last few months. People can feel that if I talk about superpowers, A, it has to mean something completely extraordinary, like flying or X-ray vision. And B, they have a feeling that it means that those people can't have any challenges, that somehow having a superpower means life is easy and everything moves smoothly and there's never anything wrong. I don't believe that either one of those things is true. I believe we all have superpowers. And sometimes we don't recognize those because we think that everybody thinks the way that we do. We don't know that we do have these gifts and these strengths that make us who we are and that are really valuable. And if we learn how to channel those things and embrace them and harness them, they can often, because they are the other side of the challenge, they can often help us deal more effectively with those challenges. So those are the kinds of things that I work with, both in my one-on-one and my group work. Um, Back to the superpowers for a second. I think women who are everyone, again, all genders, but since we're talking with women here, women who are wired differently have so many gifts to give the world, and often they feel defeated or challenged or like they have hoops that they have to go through or things they have to overcome. I will speak as one of them because I'm also I am neurodivergent in multiple ways, and yes, there are challenges. Things are hard, and things can feel harder for us than they do sometimes for other people who don't have who are wired. I'll put in the air quotes neurotypically, right? I don't believe there is anything. I don't believe neurotypical really exists. All our brains are different, right?
Right.
There is no such thing as a neurotypical brain. That's just me. Um, I believe that we can design our lives and create the conditions that we need to thrive. And that's going to look a little bit different for everyone. But as we learn more about ourselves and we become more aware of the things that are our superpowers, we can redesign and realign and make sure that all of the decisions that we make are in alignment with our goals and in alignment with our values and meet our needs. And as women who are smart and high achievers, we often tend to put everyone else first, take care of everyone else, take care of everything else, and push through and
Mm-hmm.
don't give ourselves breaks and don't necessarily trust other people to take on some of those things. And we might have trouble delegating and we might be a little perfectionistic. And
I was just going to ask you, so what are some of these traits? You're talking about wired differently. So what are some of these traits? And I can venture to guess that there are a few women watching this who are doing a little bit of this as well. Huh. So please continue sharing some of these superpowers of the women that you work with.
absolutely. So, okay, I'll just to list a few up front. We tend to be extremely empathetic. And keep in mind, again, these are superpowers, but they also have challenges attached to them, right? So, high levels of empathy, deep empathy. We understand other people. We understand where they're coming from. We feel for them. Sometimes we literally feel for them. Empaths often feel physically what other people are feeling. That can be a huge burden. At the same time, as a leader, you can understand what your people need. You can read a room and know what kind of tone is what people need, what will motivate, what will inspire. You can give people what they need in ways that someone who doesn't have this gift is not capable of doing. And we all know plenty of people who can't do that, right? Intuition. We tend to get a lot of intuitive hits. We don't always listen to them, but we tend to have it very strongly unless we blocked it for some reason. And there are things that you need to do to sort of unblock it. But we tend to be able to access that. And we need to learn to listen to it more too, because it's usually right on. We tend to, so one of the things about the way our brains work is we have fewer filters on incoming data and information. So we're taking more in, we're processing more, and we're processing it more deeply. And there are brain studies that have been done around this. I'm keeping this very general because there are some controversies around the differences between HSPs or highly sensitive people, autistic people, people with ADHD, people with other forms of neurodivergence. I'm just putting it into a giant bucket of wired a little differently. So we're all different. None of this is the same, but these are traits that we all tend to have. So we tend to, with all of this information that we're processing and the things that we're not filtering out, we tend to have the ability to make connections quickly between a lot of different things. And not everyone can do this. And that itself leads to a couple of superpowers. One of them is an ability to think several steps ahead, which is fabulous for strategic decision making and planning and for understanding why a decision, might or might not work, or why you might need to tweak a plan, a few steps down the road. It is also really good for being able to see both the big picture and the details at the same time. Most people are really just big picture people or detail people. We have an ability to do both. There are challenges associated with those things, as you can imagine and have
Uh-huh.
probably experienced.
Uh-huh.
But understanding them and understanding that we are able to do those things and that not everyone else can is really important and can also help us change the way that we communicate to help us get on the same page with some of these other people.
Hmm.
So I'll give you one example. Years ago, I got 360 feedback from a boss, somebody I really liked and respected. And I was always, I worked ridiculous numbers of hours. I cared deeply about my work.
Hmm.
And I got the feedback that a few people on the team felt that I stomped on other people's ideas and that I wasn't a team player. I cried. This
Hmm.
feedback crushed me because deep empathy, right? I loved my team. I wanted to support them. That's what I was there for. And what I have learned since is when people would come up with ideas, my brain was always going several steps ahead. And the first thing that came was why a certain thing wouldn't work because I could
Hmm.
see that pattern and I could see what was going to come from it. But I skipped the steps where I actually articulated that I was seeing those in between steps because it never occurred to me because I assumed everybody could see that, right? Now I know. So that makes me a terrible brainstormer, right? Because when you're brainstorming, you're supposed to not, say no to any
Hmm.
ideas. Everything is supposed to be good, right? That's very hard for us to do sometimes because we can immediately see what's not going to work. So it's hard not to say no. Understanding that about the way that our brains work means we can step back and try a different approach. We can yes and we can pull out the things that are valuable from those ideas and say, what about if we did something different? Or we can just shut up for a while until the brainstorming phase is over and we start to winnow down the ideas and then explain why certain things probably aren't going to be as effective. So a little bit about the superpowers and
Yeah, the
the way they're
challenges
tied.
and ways to adapt based on your superpower potentially creating challenges, right? Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so earlier you mentioned that we were going to dive deeper into some things about different traits, autistic traits. I want to make sure that we covered that in just what we just
Mm.
talked about. Was there anything more that you wanted to share about that?
It's a really tricky subject because there is a lot of, I'll just say, sensitivity and stigma around the different terms. And there are, there's very little shared understanding of what a lot of these terms mean. And we all make assumptions based on our backgrounds and what we've learned and people we know. And this has been challenging for me in writing the manuscript of Perceptive because and I realized, so right now I've finished the first draft. I need to do some revisions and polish the manuscript before it gets published. And I really need to focus more on the language because I use several different terms, and a couple of my beta readers have pointed out it can be confusing.
So
I
I'm gonna pause you right there, and I don't think we've actually told uh, anybody that you're actually in the middle of writing a book. So
Right.
let's take a step back. You're actually writing a book, and
I
this book
am.
is called Perceptive. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
The book is called Perceptive. The working subtitle is Owning Your Power When You're Wired Differently. And for those of you not familiar with publishing, working subtitle just means subject to change. Um, when I started out, I was working with people who considered themselves or identified as highly sensitive. That term itself has a lot of stigma associated with it. And in fact, I just read an article today in Psychology Today that was talking about the fact that that could be a misnomer, that as a personality trait, it may not actually exist or be scientifically verifiable,
Mhm.
and that it might be masking autistic traits. Now, autism is a whole can of worms, and I say that in the most loving way. Um, there are a lot of us who have a picture of autism that was created 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that is not accurate today. It actually never was accurate, but given the research that existed at the time and the medical professionals who pretty much focused on young white males, we had a very limited picture of what autism looks like. Today, we know that it can look very, very different in everyone, and that people who are AFAB, who were born as female, identified as female at birth, um, can manifest the traits very, very differently.
Mm.
We also tend to be more natural at masking, whether we are doing this consciously or not. We may have no idea that we're actually doing it, but we're very good at observing our world and at understanding, picking up the signs of what behaviors are acceptable in society in general and what behaviors aren't, and adapting ourselves to
Mm.
meet societal expectations and norms.
Mm.
And that's even if we don't have a family that's constantly, drilling that into us, which many of us do. So there there is a rapidly increasing understanding of what autism can look like. And if you had said to me 5 years ago, I think you're autistic, I would have been like, what? Of course not. Where did that come from? I have met so many women in my age group who were really good students, total high achievers in school, achieved leadership roles in their work life, did a lot. And one of the things that is a common belief about autistics that is now known not to be true is that they don't have any empathy and they don't enjoy social interaction.
Mm.
Absolutely not true. It's just that it might look a little bit different. And so I am starting to learn, not starting to learn. I am taking the things that I have been learning and looking back on my own life and recognizing patterns that fit autism and also ADHD. And that's a whole other bucket because there's a term called ADHD, which is when you
Mm.
have both ADHD and autism. There's actually a huge amount of overlap between the two. There's something like between a 50 and 75% rate of co-occurrence between the two of them.
Mm.
So it's actually more common to have both than to have just one.
Mm.
Um, there are things that never made any sense in my life that make sense looking at it through the lens of ADHD.
Mm.
I have had a lot of conversations in the last several months with people about whether HSP, highly sensitive person trait, and autism are completely separate and can co-occur, or whether they're actually part of the same thing.
Mm.
There are some people who are very, very attached to the HSP label. I've never particularly liked that label because there's a stigma to being too sensitive.
Mhm.
Um, there are gifts around sensitivity that I would never give up that I think are absolutely amazing. And in addition to all the things that I mentioned before, we notice things that people don't notice. We can get joy from things that people don't even pay attention to. We tend to be really drawn to creative activities and the arts and nature and things that make our world beautiful. And those
Mhm.
are really important. Um, at the same time, we might be super sensitive to sound or to smells or to medications or to alcohol. And I have all of those things too. So again, two sides of the same coin. But back to the labels. It's going to take a long time for society in general to get to the point where autism is accepted as broadly as some other kinds of traits, like dyslexia, for example. Still a lot of people who don't understand it, still a stigma in certain ways, but it's much more understood, and schools and teachers are understand a lot more about it and are
Mhm.
more able to accommodate the needs of people who are dyslexic. It's still going to take us some time to get there with autism, but we need to learn more because I'm totally fascinated by all of the things that I've come across and all of the experts that I've learned about in the last several months who talk about what we used to think of as just being shy or very introverted
Mhm.
or socially anxious or um, highly sensitive might actually be something different.
Mhm. So tell us a little bit about your book. Is all of this stuff covered in the book you're writing? Like, just share with us a bit about that.
So this is, as I mentioned, the first draft is written. It's going to change a little bit as I revise it and update it. I've struggled a little bit to really describe the book because it can't be all things to all people. There's so much to cover. This is such a huge topic. I interviewed 16 women leaders, all of whom identify as either highly sensitive or neurodivergent or both. And I incorporated parts of their stories along with my own, along with some neuroscience, along with some tips and techniques and approaches to dealing with some of the challenges. For the most part, it is oriented toward professionals and the workplace, but the content is really applicable to anyone who has these traits, whether you are at home taking care of a family, or you're in the workplace, or you have your own business. Um, it's I want to be very careful about how I talk about it because I had one person say, well, you should make it more journalistic. And another person said, I wanted more neuroscience. And another person said, I wanted more of the case stories of the women. It's only one book, and there's only so much that I could cover. What I really wanted to do with it was first tell the stories about how these women have experienced these various traits, and both the positive and the negative. And my goal there was so many of the women that I encounter and women who come to me as clients say, I feel so alone. And I've felt this way my entire life. You are not alone. We are not alone. There are so many of us out there, and we can achieve great things.
Hmm.
So the stories of the women are really important because there are some incredible women in the book, and they are leaders in different aspects of their lives, and they're all smart and competent and capable and talented and empathetic. And and they have challenges, and they talk about those too. And the other piece of it was how these things relate specifically to the workplace and professional life and leadership, and that workplace can be your own if you're, a solopreneur, or it can be, a company that you run. Um, there are, as I said, some tips and techniques and approaches for thinking about some of the challenges that we face and for creating and designing an environment that is more more of the conditions that you need, that each of us needs, because they're all
Mhm.
different.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember because you and I are in a mentorship program together, and I remember bringing up a challenge of um, I had even a sticker, I think, that said, "Hang on, let me overthink this," and just bringing up a challenge of overthinking everything. And I remember when we first had this conversation, you started asking me some of these questions, like about traits and about the challenges and various different things. And it to me, it was a big aha moment because I would never have known to consider myself wired differently or potentially HSP or anything else. And so I think for a lot of people that this book that you're writing can shed some light on some things that they may not be aware of. And like you said, that may make them feel less alone. But that's why I think this book that you're writing is important. But I would love to hear from you. Why is this book important to you to get out into the world?
I think for exactly the reason that you just described. So again, I mentioned that I didn't want people to feel alone because that's when they come to me, that's the way they feel. And when I have people who aren't clients, I do a lot of I host executive roundtables with both corporate women and entrepreneurs, and I ask them questions about these things. And the feeling alone is the top thing that I hear. The research on HSPs alone, so forget all of the other stuff, but HSPs actually make up about 30% of the population. That's huge when you're feeling alone.
Mhm.
That's one out of every three or four people that you encounter. Not everybody's going to wear a big sign and say, that's me for a lot of reasons, right? But I really, really want people to know that they are not the only people that are going through what they're going through. And it's easy to feel, oh, I overthink everything, but nobody else does that. Or, um, I get this kind of 360 feedback, but nobody else does. Or I struggle because, um, I can't give feedback to my direct reports because I'm so attached to their feelings around it. You are not alone. And there are so many things that you're good at that other people aren't good at.
Mm.
So I'm really, really passionate about it. And that's why I want to get this out into the world.
Mm.
And it's also why, if I can mention the campaign that's
That's
going
my,
on,
I was just going to go into that. So I think we're on the same page.
love
I
it.
would love for you to share what is, actually, I would love to start with the give because this is a group of reciprocity here and co-creation and collaboration. So I'd love to start with the give. What is it that you are offering our awesome members?
So I would love to offer your members a sneak peek at the book. I have the introduction ready to send out. So I have a link that they can go to sign up, and they can then download the introduction to the book. Please keep in mind that it's the first draft, so it may change, but it will give you a sense of why I wrote the book and what it's about. Um, and I can put that link in your in our community underneath the recording.
Perfect.
Um, so that's the gift. I hope that people enjoy it, and if anybody has feedback too, I welcome it because
Awesome.
more to come.
Awesome. And how can we support you, Rachel?
So I am working with a hybrid publisher, and very briefly, if you self-publish, that means you do everything. You pay for everything, and you have to find the editors and the copy editors and proofreaders and cover designers and book layout editors, and you have to do all of the production work yourself. If you get a conventional publishing deal, which is very, very rare, they do everything for you. But it's kind of a one in a million thing at the moment. Like it's very hard to get a publishing deal. I am working with a hybrid publisher, which is a combination, like it sounds. And what that means is I put in an initial investment. I have people from the publisher working with me, but I need to raise the funds for the book itself to be published. So I am, we are halfway through the fundraising campaign right now. It ends on January 3rd. And I need to raise another about $4,500, which is a lot, but we've raised 5,500, which is awesome. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm super excited about this. I would love your help, the help of the women in this community. Um, if you go to the website that I will link in the community, there are many opportunities to support the fundraising campaign. The most basic level, you pre-order a copy of the book. If the campaign is successful and the book comes out, it will come out next summer. But pre-ordering gives you a number of perks. You'll be invited to a virtual launch party, which is going to include a panel of the women who were interviewed in the book, and will also include a raffle ticket that includes both free coaching sessions and intuitive readings and copies of some of the books that a couple of the other women in the group wrote. So there's
Mm,
a lot there. Plus, you'll help me choose the cover design and get more sneak peeks and be part of my author community. There are also opportunities for anyone who might be interested in a talk about neurodiversity or high sensitivity or any of these topics or inclusive leadership with their organization, or a workshop with their organization, or executive leadership coaching. There are big discounts on all of those things, and 100% of the proceeds go towards getting this book edited, designed, and published. So you will also have deep, deep gratitude, not only from me, but from the whole world of people who will get to learn about this when the book comes out.
that's amazing. And then, what about the potential for even sharing this opportunity with their community or sharing it on their social media, or what opportunities are available for that?
Anything they like. So I have content that I am happy to share. I have images of the mock-up of the book. Um, I have already done this for several people who have sent it out in their newsletters to their own communities and their followers and posted it on social media. So you're free to take content from the website itself that I'll link, or you can just reach out to me directly and let me know, who it is that you're talking to and what would be helpful for you, and I can provide that.
Okay. And
So
what is the best way for somebody to get in touch with you if they've got further questions or what they would like to help support in promotion or any other way?
there are multiple ways. The easiest one is just emailing me, which is Rachel, Rachel, the simple version, at rercoaching.com. You can do that. You can reach me on Facebook through the Woo Women Entrepreneurs community. You can go to my website, which is rercoaching.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, which is where I hang out a lot. I'm one of the very few Rachel Radways in the world, so it should be pretty clear which one is me.
Awesome. 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 And will you be able to put all your contact details also in the comments or in the
I can do
description?
that. I can
Beautiful.
do that. Yeah, perfect.
Very cool. All right, my dear. Well, any final words of wisdom, any final takeaways, any final just what would you like to wrap up and share with our audience?
Christine, I'm so grateful to you for having me here. I love what you're doing with this community. We need to lift each other up. And that's my goal with the work I do and with the book. And I just want to emphasize, if you are one of the many of us who have grown up with messages of being weird or broken or crazy or alone, you are none of those things and you have gifts. And um, I would love to help you learn more about those gifts and share them with the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.